here in Brighton Youth, there are certain topics we'll cover in our preaching every year, like romance, studies, and financial stewardship. Last year in June, Pastor Wickett told us that he will add one more recurring topic which is crucial to everybody in the youth stage of their lives. Can anyone remember what it is? Well, you may not remember the series title exactly, but looking at this series, you'll be able to guess that the topic is leadership. I want to recap some of the things Pastor Wickett said because it forms the basis for us going through this series. Now, among teenagers, there are two main groups of people. The first group are the people who want to be leaders. You are eager to step up, serve, and represent people. And maybe right now you are trying to get into student council, the executive committee, exco of a CCA, or to be appointed as a peer support leader. Or maybe you want to be a service team or cell group leader. Come and speak to me, okay? Or Pastor Wickett after this service. The second group of people are those who don't want to be or don't think you can be leaders. You think that nobody will listen to me, or maybe you are turned off by the leaders you have come across because they are arrogant and hypocritical. They're just being leaders for the glory and credit, and you don't want to be like them. No matter which group you belong to, I want to tell you that it is absolutely normal to want to desire to become a leader. In fact, all of us should grow in leadership because there will be situations in your life that require you to step up as a leader. It could be at home, in school, or church. That being said, learning to be a leader and growing as a leader does not come easily or naturally. Which is why in this series, I want to help us by touching on three aspects of leadership. Our mindset, leading with our heads; our motivation, leading with our hearts; and method, leading with our hands. Today we start with mindset because your way of thinking about leadership sets the foundation for everything else. What does it take to lead a group of people? What qualities should a leader possess? Am I the right person? Am I good enough? These are usually the first and most important questions we have. Now, having a clear understanding in our heads will help us to lead people and grow ourselves in the right direction. To answer these questions, we will look at a Bible passage found in Psalms chapter 78 concerning King David. Now, reading from verse 70, God chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. From tending the sheep, he brought him to be the shepherd of his people, Jacob, of Israel, his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands, he led them. From this passage, there are three things we can learn about what it takes to be a leader. The first is character. Write that down, character. The first and most important quality in being a leader is your character. Character is a big word. How do we define it? Let me first tell you what it is not. Character is not about your age. It is not about your appearance. It is not about your achievements. It is not about your academics. It is about your attitude. Character is the habitual ways you respond to the situations of life. Character is the sum of your thoughts, intentions, desires, and actions. The passage we just read, Psalm 78, is a very long psalm with 72 verses in total. Now it concentrates mainly on Israel's history and the lessons to be learned, then concludes with God choosing King David to shepherd his people, which is in the three verses, right, we just read. Why did God choose David? And what made David stand out among all the kings of Israel? The first and most important is his character. Let's read verse 72 again. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart. Underline the 3 words, integrity of heart. David was an effective leader because he possessed good character. David is believed to have been between 12 to 16 years of age when he was anointed as the king of Israel. Now raise your hand if you are between 12 to 16. Some liars, but it's okay. I think most of you are between 12 to 16. David, put your hands down. David was the youngest of Jesse's son, youngest. Okay, an unlikely choice for king, humanly speaking. Samuel thought David's oldest brother was surely the anointed one. But look at what God told Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance, the older brother's appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 7 of Jesse's sons passed before Samuel, but God had chosen none of them. Samuel asked, Jesse, do you have more sons? The youngest, David, was out tending sheep. So they called the boy in, and Samuel anointed David with oil. At this point, some of you may be wondering, but how can David be considered a man of good character when he had committed terrible sins, including adultery and murder? Character is gauged by general tendencies, not on the basis of a few isolated actions. We must look at the whole life. David's life was a portrait of both success and failure. And the Bible records the fact that David was far from perfect. But what made David a cut above the rest was that his heart was pointed towards God. After he sinned, David was truly repentant. He admitted his sins to God and asked for God's forgiveness. He had a deep desire to follow God's will and do everything God wanted him to do. David was a man of character, a man after God's own heart, although he sinned on occasion. Character has to do with what goes on deep down in that place that the Bible calls the heart. It is our intentions, our inclinations, how we are disposed to live, the desires, the motives, the habits of our hearts. Let me give you an example of what character looks like. Who knows this duo? Anybody know? Oh, you know, you're old. Okay, seen them on social media. Scammer. They are the famous property Lim brothers, that's right. Now, when I first saw their video on social media, I immediately dismissed it as another typical property advertisement and felt that they are using their relationship as siblings to boost their views. But fun fact, they are not blood brothers, they are just friends. Yeah. Today it's common to see property agents using home tour videos to sell houses. But did you know, Property Lim brothers, that is Melvin and Adrian, are the first in Singapore to tap on digital technology and social media to put the property viewing experience into your hands, which is why you saw them, right? Or rather your phones and devices. Today, their YouTube channel has more than 52,400 and counting subscribers. Its 900 plus videos made in-house have been viewed more than 49 million times. Both Melvin and Adrian have been named millionaire agents for achieving over 1 million in gross commissions in 2019 and 2020. Anyone aspiring to be property agents? Please remember me when you become a millionaire. Now, but behind their success is a story that few know about. I used to be very suspicious, Melvin said, right? Because he adhered to feng shui-related beliefs. Okay, they included restrictions, such as only moving office on certain dates, changing the colors of the doormat every month, placing the children's bed at an angle. And he had done all this to make sure that the family stayed safe and business remained good. In 2011, during a time he felt burnt out and lost, a secondary school friend invited Melvin to church. 3 months later, Melvin invited Christ into his life. Within a month of accepting Christ, he cleared his home of things that were not pleasing to God. He invited his wife, his friend Adrian, and his cousins to church. They all eventually came to the Lord. But there was still a lot of things they were doing in business that were not in line with God's word. The way they viewed the business and customers was not correct. They viewed customers, imagine all of you, as walking commissions. They just wanted to close the deal and didn't think of the implications of how they conducted business. They were young and ambitious. They loved to take shortcuts to try to get ahead of the game, find ways to cut corners. One of these shortcuts resulted in a business decision mistake. A year after, Melvin became a Christian. So their bank accounts were depleted to zero, and they felt the Lord rebuking them. By then, they were considered mature agents, but they had to start from scratch. It was a total reset. They experienced 4 years of drought. Commissions were low, yet it was a time of spiritual growth. In those 4 years, they started developing practices based on biblical principles that would form the core values of what we know today, Property Lim Brothers. Instead of looking at customers as walking commissions in terms of how much each was potentially worth, they started putting themselves in the seller's shoes, asking themselves questions such as, if I am selling my asset, how would I want my property agent to treat me? And this is what Melvin says. When I felt I was just working for money, it was very tiring. But since coming to know the Lord and having a mindset shift, I wake up excited every day. I feel like I'm working for God. I feel more energetic. I am more empowered. When I see people now, customers, business associates, family, I know what my purpose in life is. And that is to be excellent for God, to touch as many people as I can. They now work with integrity. How do we evaluate our characters? Let me give you some handles. I think there are 3 character traits that are especially important in being a leader. And write that down. First, humility. Are you teachable and open to feedback and correction? Humility. Second one, security. Do you find your significance in Christ and are not easily shaken by setbacks? The last one, reliability. Have you been faithful with assigned tasks and responsibility? Character is not makeup. Character cannot be fabricated. It is a matter of the heart. It is not something you take off and put on. You either have it or you don't. And only you and God knows. Listen to this. Be more concerned with your character than with your reputation. Your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. Character is the very essence of who you are. Not who you are when everything is going well, not when your project mates are all cooperative, not when you have all the gadgets, clothes, and shoes you want. But character is who you are when you are tired, angry, stressed, or jealous. Character is who you are when you receive bad news, when you do not get what you want, when your family members trigger you, when you are not in church settings, when no one is looking. To succeed in being a leader, you first need a strong and honorable character. And the second is commitment. If character is who you are when no one is looking, then commitment is what keeps you going when everyone else is quitting. And that is what leaders do. Leaders are devoted to the mission and success of their people in good and especially bad times. Because it is easy to lead and want to lead when things are going well and morale is high. But it takes commitment for a leader to persevere through the mundane and low seasons. And here's the thing about being a leader. If you stick around long enough as a leader, you are bound to encounter difficulties and challenges. David's commitment was tested and shown even before he became a king. Let's read verse 71 again. From tending the sheep, God brought him, David, to be the shepherd of his people, Jacob, of Israel, his inheritance. Before David was a shepherd of God's people, he was a shepherd of sheep. Shepherding sheep is a job that requires commitment because of the nature of sheep. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of sheep? Now ask the person next to you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of sheep? How many of you think they look cute? How many of you become hungry when you think of them? You think of mutton. Mutton satay, mutton rendang, cruel, yo. Okay, let me tell you what sheep are really like. First, sheep are one of the few animals that do not have a defense system. Sheep are helpless without a shepherd. Second, sheep are notorious for following the leader, regardless of how dangerous or foolish that may be. And third, sheep are prone to wander away from the flock. A sheep's only chance of survival is with the flock, under the care of a shepherd. For these reasons, shepherding sheep is a job that requires 24/7 attention. Shepherds need to be on call for their sheep round the clock. During biblical times, families in the Middle East relied upon sheep to provide food, wool, and sheepskin. Because sheep were so valuable, shepherds would stay with the flock to protect them day and night. It takes commitment to be a good shepherd. In fact, remember what David was doing when Samuel called for him? He was tending to his sheep. David's ability as a shepherd was clearly connected with God using him to lead Israel. David's life as a shepherd continued to play a role after he left the fields. Much of what he learned leading sheep, he applied as a leader of men. Anyone knows this couple? Not this couple, the man and the woman. Anyone knows them? It's a family, thank you. Okay, this guy is Prince Charles. This lady here is the late Princess Diana. They came from the British royal family. So once, when it was still very rare, the royal couple allowed TV cameras into their home to film them as a normal couple with their two children. During the interview, Prince Charles described his job in these terms. He said, the job, more than anything else, is a way of life. It's more than a job. It's a complete 24-hour-a-day business, really. Leadership in any organization, whether in the church, school, or an outside club, is never just a job. It is always a way of life, a 24-hour-a-day commitment. The leader, in a sense, must always be on the job, deciding, directing, and developing the work that has been entrusted to him, while at the same time encouraging those in the work. To understand the importance of commitment in leadership, let's look at two world leaders. Anyone knows this guy? You know I'll be impressed. Anyone knows this guy? Yes, Jacob, what you say? Huh? Luke? Okay, this guy is Ashraf Ghani. Do you know who he is? Still don't know, right? Okay, he is the second and last president of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Okay, if you recall, one of the most significant world events last year was the, got read news now, withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan in August, nearly 20 years after it invaded the country in response to the 2001 September 11 attacks on America. As the US forces made their exit, the Taliban, a militant group, began a widespread offensive to take over control of the country. If you were the Afghanistan president, what would you have done? Help me ask your neighbor, in times like that, if you were the Afghanistan president, what would you have done? Discuss with your role. US forces are leaving, the Taliban group is coming in, you're the country's president. What will you do? Okay, now, the country would definitely have looked to the president for their leader for direction and help. But what actually happened was the president fled the country. He left as the militant group closed in on the capital. He did not say where he was, and it was not clear where he was headed. The Taliban ultimately entered the capital and faced little to no resistance from the Afghan government forces when they did. They took over the presidential palace, took a Wi-Fi, and sealed a nationwide military victory in just 10 days. Some local social media users in Afghanistan called Ghani a coward for leaving them in chaos. Now, the next world leader, who knows him? Oh, wow. Oh, okay. His name may be a little difficult to pronounce, but I'm sure you have been seeing quite a bit of him lately. He is Ukraine's current president, Volodymyr Zelensky. Okay, the Russian invasion of Ukraine that started last Thursday has been capturing the world's attention, and I see your attention. And one man who has stood out for good reasons is Zelensky. As Russia bombards Ukraine, it will be painful to see, but understandable if Zelensky chooses to leave the country. After all, fleeing heads of state are not uncommon, just as we have seen. The odds continue to be stacked against Ukraine, and Zelensky has actually little reason to be optimistic. Yet, he's there night after night. Russia's #1 target has transformed into the wartime president Ukraine desperately needs in this hour of darkness. There are multiple videos of Zelensky, this is one of them, walking out to his embattled capital city to declare that he is staying the course to fight for his country and broadcasting so to encourage his fellow countrymen. He even reportedly turned down a US offer to evacuate the country. At this point of the invasion, what is turning the tide are the Ukrainians deciding themselves to stand their ground. The elderly, women, and children are packing off to neighboring safe havens, while the men arm themselves. And all it took was the commitment of one man to inspire millions. We see from the two examples that the more committed a leader is, the more committed his or her followers will be. The more committed followers are, the higher the likelihood they will invest into the cause and achieve better outcomes. A leader's job is to lead, inspire, and motivate people to achieve a common goal. This cannot be done without the leader showing commitment. Commitment is being dedicated to a cause. Commitment is setting your heart to fulfill a purpose. A committed leader will not leave the followers to sort out solutions to problems. A committed leader devotes himself to the cause and is on the front line in finding solutions to any challenging issues. A leader that shies away from challenges and pushes the followers to a problematic situation is not committed. Commitment is a vital quality in being a leader. A leader will not function well without being committed to the cause or the group he or she has been appointed to lead. Nothing that is valuable is achieved without effort. It does not take great men to do great things. It only takes committed men. Now that we understand it takes character and commitment to be a leader, the last quality I want to touch on is competence. It may seem self-explanatory, but leaders must be competent. Being competent means having the suitable or sufficient skill, knowledge, and experience. With greater competence comes a greater ability and confidence to successfully accomplish our goals as leader. Psalm 78 concludes with a reference to David's competence. Let's read it again. With skillful hands, he led them. We already know David was a good shepherd. What about David as a leader of men? David led with skillful hands. That's competence. Let me tell you some of David's achievements as king of Israel. He defeated the enemies of Israel. He expanded the geographical boundaries. He captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites and made it the capital city of Israel. He made Jerusalem a religious center by bringing the Ark of the Covenant there. He made peace treaties with his neighbors. He composed psalms which are used during worship. He united the 12 tribes under one ruler. He made preparations for the construction of the temple. All Israel loved David because he could lead them into battle. He was a decision maker who made the right decisions, and with skill, he served his own generation. It's good to know that David was competent, but that may not be very helpful to us. The more important and useful question we should be asking is, what contributed to David's competence? And the answer is his youth days. God prepared David for leadership during his early days, his growing up years. Remember earlier I mentioned how old David was when he was anointed? Okay, ask your neighbor to test if he or she was listening. How old was David when he was anointed? That's right, David was between 12 to 16 years old. And that's what most of you here are. In fact, all of you here are still in the days of your youth. Okay, other than undergoing leadership development by being a shepherd, what else did David do in his younger days? David served King Saul. And by doing so, he became familiar with the ways of a king by observing the way Saul ruled and learned royal etiquette. He became Saul's armor bearer, learned how to be a warrior and military leader. And he was most famously known for offering to fight the giant Goliath. This story is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Let's take a look from verse 32. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. David assures Saul that he has had combat experience. David may not have fought any giants like Goliath, but he had waged war on some dangerous animals that had sought to steal some of his sheep. His years of shepherding have served to prepare him for this battle with Goliath. David was only a boy, but he was confident that God would deliver him from the hand of this Philistine. And he spectacularly killed Goliath with a slingshot. Who would have thought that David's early years were divinely ordained so that his experiences would prepare him for the awesome task of facing Goliath, dealing with the wrath of a jealous King Saul, or with the challenges of leading a nation. God began to prepare David at a very early age. In all that young David went through, God was shaping him for the years and the tasks ahead. This is not just true of David years ago. It is also true for Christians today. Young person, if you are a Christian, God has a purpose and calling for your life. God is likewise shaping you through experiences, beginning with your childhood. No doubt these experiences may not appear to be a part of a bigger plan at that moment. And very likely, a number of these experiences, like those of David, are not pleasurable. But as I look back on my life, I can see the hand of God shaping and preparing me for what He has called me to do. If you are a Christian, you should begin to see God's hand in your life as well. Do not be mistaken. Competence is not perfection. Let me repeat it. Competence is not perfection. There will not be anyone qualified to be a leader if one of the criteria is to be perfect. The comforting thing to know is this. Competence is gained by experience over time. No one starts out knowing everything and possessing every skill. A competent leader is always learning. It's not knowing all the answers, but being willing to learn, being willing to be used by God, being willing to be shaped by the events in your life. What are you doing now to grow in competence? What are you investing your time and energy into? Are they helping you to develop skillful hands? I invite the worship team to join me on stage. I've chosen to start this series by getting us to first understand the qualities that make a leader, because it will set the basis for the subsequent two messages where we'll talk about the motivation and methods of leadership. The world chooses leaders for their personality, values them by their position, and grades them by their popularity. But not so with God. In God's kingdom, the attributes that He looks for in a leader are godly character, high commitment, and strong competence. Hearing this, some of you may feel inspired, or some of you may feel, being a leader is not easy. Can I offer you some encouragement? The greatest leaders in the Bible, David had failed in character, Peter had failed in commitment, and Moses had failed in competence. But God still chose them, because leadership at the end of the day is about Him, not us. God chooses unlikely people because He shows Himself strong in our weaknesses. He chooses ordinary people because no one is born with character, commitment, and competence. Rather, they are byproducts of an active and close walk with God. The key to growing as a leader is growing your relationship with God.